Hello everyone, my name is Jemilah Mahmood. I'm with the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Society, and with me today we are very happy to have Madam Monique Pariat from the European Commission for Humanitarian Organized ECHO. She's the Director General, and today we're really having a fireside chat on education in emergencies, and really I want it to be as interactive as possible. We're on a 360. So it's a 3D if you have 3D glasses, but feel free to really have a conversation. Now, why education in emergencies? I think we know, for example, there are 758 million people who are illiterate around the world, and today 107 million are also unemployed, 702 million are poor, 2 billion people live in conflict and fragile situations, and 65.6 million people are forcibly displaced. And in that, 22.5 million refugees, 51% are under the age of 18. So a lot of the refugees and displaced people will be living outside their normal place, and a lot of them will not know any other home except a refugee camp or a displaced settlement. So for this, we believe that education plays a really important role in empowering people, but also building resilience, ensuring that there's social inclusion, there's lasting peace at family, community, and society levels. And education has the ability to help individuals develop knowledge, values, and skills to take up an active role as compassionate, responsible citizens. We also know without education, we put a lot of young people at risk of risky behavior, and I think this is why we want to have a dialogue on education in emergencies. We're very happy to have Monique here because the ECHO and the EU writ large is very passionate about education. I know the commissioner, when I first met him, he said to me, you know, we can't deal with all these crises unless we deal with education. So perhaps Monique, to start off, maybe you share with us the perspectives as a Director General of ECHO, where you see education in emergencies moving forward from now.
Thank you, Jemilah, and thank you for inviting me to this conversation, which is indeed very, very timely and very important for us. As you say, education in emergencies was not part of what we considered as being the core missions of humanitarian aid. But I think we have to change our mindset, because we see, and you mentioned a number of quite frightening figures, which are very, very accurate. We provide humanitarian relief more and more in protracted situations, where people are displaced not only because they faced either a natural disaster or conflict or for a limited period of time and then they go back home, but where they are displaced for 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and there's no way that the younger persons, or the children, even the teenagers, get an interruption or even a lack of education during this period. So this is why we have included education as one of the core functions that we need to cover in humanitarian aid. And you mentioned my commissioner, Christos Stylianidis. He's really the champion for that. And when he arrived in the commission 2.5 years ago, there was hardly 1% of the spending that was dedicated to education in emergencies. Now we will be reaching this year 8%, and we will continue to increase the percentage of our support for education in emergencies. So we are now we'll be spending some more than 18 million euros for specific projects addressing the education needs of young people. And I will develop that, but as an introductory remarks, I just wanted to say this is for us a big concern. We have no right to leave generations behind, and this is why we consider as food, shelter, health, education is also part of the core missions of humanitarian relief.
I think that's really encouraging. 800% increase in 3 years since he has been commissioner. No, I wanted to share that, you know, there are so many important actors doing education. We have UNICEF, Save the Children, and Save the Children today, again, working in very difficult contexts, had their offices attacked in Jalalabad, right? So we're working in very difficult contexts, trying to provide education to people who are displaced or in very fragile situations. As a federation, and you will know that the leadership in the federation is passionate about education, and we all believe, because we are also part of the group that has majority of our volunteers as youth as well, who can engage with young people in very difficult contexts. We are looking at education now from a different perspective, not just the formal education that is being done by governments and large agencies, but for us, what we bring is really the whole issue around values education. How do the humanitarian principles themselves, impartiality, neutrality, independence, humanity, actually contribute to a young person's development? And our contribution to education, we would like to focus on young people and youth, really getting them access to education online, and not just formal education, but also life skills. And we have this terrific program called Youth as Agents of Behavioral Change, where it's a peer-to-peer education model that young people can actually talk about things as difficult as racism or gender-based violence, empathy, and how to actually have discourse when you don't agree with each other. What I'm saying here is that we need to look at education as a very holistic approach, and that this is one aspect we feel is quite key and actually quite missing in the whole education sector in emergencies. But how do we have terrific things going on? We have the education fund that was launched at the World Vision Summit, and we have other initiatives. Monique, if you had to give us advice, what advice would you give us in order for us to really get many more donors and many more partners, including private sector and governments themselves, to really focus on the importance of education in emergencies?
Giving advice is always a complicated thing, but I think what we see is that, as you mentioned, the needs of the children and young people in displaced settings, or in people who had to flee conflict situation, and that's the framework where we more and more work. They have very specific needs. Classical education needs, but they have also specific needs in terms of protection, of social support, psychological support also, because they have been going through horrific things. We have to take into account also more the needs of women and girls. I think this is also something that is very important, and it is most of the time overlooked, because they have suffered also differently, so most of the time, but also they have different kind of needs. So this is the educational path, but this is also the needs in terms of nutrition, sometimes in terms of family planning, and this is a very sensitive issue, but this is also important in terms of health. So we need to encompass a lot of things, and that's on let's say on the needs. Then there's also, as you say, very often the education system of the hosting country, if these people are displaced in another country, they have a lot of difficulties to cope with the arrival of a number of people. And we've seen that in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Turkey, in Greece, and you can name most of those places. So there is, on the one hand, you need to support maybe the government when we have a good government and ready to open places in schools and training teachers. But this takes time. So, and that's where I see the role of organizations like yours or others or that are working on that we can also work together to see how we can address this gap between the moment where the educational system of the country can maybe help. There are also language issues sometimes, often even, and I think we need also to see how the private sector can get into it. And we just coming from an event where we discussed digitalization, but I think I see also a big potential for using apps and remote systems to be able to provide, and even sometimes to continue the education path that these people had before when they were still living in their country. So I think what we need to do is to really work collectively, us as donor, you as organization, and the one that do the work on the ground, get the private sector into it also to see how we can cover precisely this first phase where we have to address the most urgent needs, and how can new technologies, innovation, the swiftness of new technologies can help, but with the protection needs that these people deserve and must have. That is the specific work of the humanitarian organizations, and that are really essential for us. When it comes to donors, I think there is a growing perception in the donor community that education is a basic need. So I think this is growing, but I think the best ways to demonstrate that we're doing a good work, and I think this is why we will also in our case we are also working on an assessment of what we have done so far with our support, so that we can also make these results public and also encourage other donors also to join and contribute.
Absolutely. And I think, speaking of partnership, we at the Federation and many of the people probably in this room are part of this global alliance of disaster risk reduction in the education sector. Because I think one of the things we have to consider is that while education is also important in emergency settings, it's very important to invest in education as far as a preparedness too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that some of the work our national societies are doing on disaster risk reduction, teaching first aid, making sure that education in preparedness becomes an essential part of a young person's life is very important. Now I'm going to turn around to the audience because I like a participatory approach. Really, any questions, any comments, anything to share on your experience with education in emergencies?
I had a question. So I'm
Sure,
Franke Bartels, and I'm working for Think, and we're working on innovation and leadership to solve societal issues. And one of the things that I encounter a lot is that the educational system in almost every country is not training kids for the skills that are needed in this century. So when there's no system, it's also an opportunity to set a new system there and train them in different things. What are your thoughts about that, and are there any programs for that?
It's education. You can discuss education at length, what is necessary, and I agree with you. There are needs that we need to address and that the educational system doesn't address. But education is also, general culture, and that you need also to convey values and also to these people where the values have been destroyed most of the time. So I think this is important also to be able to convey that, the values, the respect, the dignity, the respect for women. There are a number of things we need to bring into that. So it's not only about surviving in a difficult environment, but it's also about a more long-term approach also, so that they are able to readjust in the system afterwards, where they would need basic knowledge, and they will have to get into the integrating an education path, a normal education path. So I think this is complicated, but this is why I think we need to sit all together based on the experience of each other, because it's a bit of a new area also. So we still need to take some lessons from what we've done, what has been successful, what has failed, what can be improved. But for me, what matters is the resilience of people who have been affected, and that they are able then to integrate it to a normal system afterwards and make their way through life. And I would like to come back on your point on if I may, on on preparedness, and we talk always about the humanitarian aid when the disaster has occurred, but it's also important. We try to do more and more on that, also to work more on the preparedness phase, on the early on prevention and reduction of the vulnerability of populations, and we see that more and more in climate change times where natural disasters are more and more frequent and devastating. So this is also part where education can play a very big role in preparing people, knowing what they have to do in certain circumstances, and that goes across also not only with young people and adolescents, but also for the whole population and communities. And I see a big role for the Federation and your national societies in that, because you are really the one that are close to those populations.
Great. Please.
I just want to ask a related question, which is about, you've mentioned digitization and sort of the potential use of technology. I work in digitally mediated education, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how that might help, because I can imagine lots of different kinds of scenarios in which the digital learning might be enabling.
I think you have more and more learning by distance now, and
for better or worse.
For better or worse, yeah, of course. But when you have, well, I can take an example. Maybe we had a lot of Syrian refugees in Greece when they arrived, and one of the big issues we have, what do we do with these children when the school year starts again and they spoke no Greek, so. We had to find teachers that could speak Arabic. They had to learn Greek, but if we could have had, a way for them to have some remote access to, their regular schooling via an app or, some sort of, internet possibilities, where they could have been able to continue, at least for a while, the education path, and also with the support in the population of the refugees. There were certainly teachers, Syrian teachers that could have helped also. So I think we need also to get away from this thing that we are always the one that know how things should go, but that we empower them also, and that could be a way to bridge what technologies can bring and empower those refugees also to help themselves and find solutions while continuing to work on a better integration of the children into the local context where they are. But sometimes you cannot have everything at the same time. It's just too much. So.
I think you're spot on there. I think most of the time we don't recognize the talent within the group of migrants or refugees that are there. I just want to tell you a little story about a donor advisory group visit we did to Greece. And this is a project, obviously ECHO has funded quite strongly. And a lot of the early days, there was a problem with water sanitation. There was sewer running through the camps, and people were getting diarrhea and so forth. And it was actually the Syrian girls who were going around educating the people about safe hygiene practices, basic primary health care. And they contributed so much that and taking care of the environment, having an ownership of their camp, and they reduced the morbidity to a really great extent. So I think there are among refugees and displaced people, teachers, doctors, lawyers, educators. So I mean, there's so many people we can rely on. I'm going to turn to you now. You put your hand up.
I just wanted to say I'm Guillaume Charon. I work with Independent Diplomat, and we work directly with refugee leaders in trying to bring their voices in the policy discussions that concern them. So the point on self-reliance and refugee agency is my reality every day. And what I've realized also through my dialogue with all those refugees is that they have a particular interest also in non-formal education. And I think that this is really where we have probably more opportunities, even so, because the challenges of formal education are so immense, and yet the other one offers so many opportunities. And I think that the EU with the compass and so on is doing quite a lot of work. So I think the hope is to see it move beyond Europe, which is now hosting refugees, but into other locations as well.
I think that's absolutely spot on, because for us as a federation or national societies are engaging with people, young people who have no access to formal education, on the non-formal education. What skills do we teach them, right? To be able to build up their little portfolio of skills, so that when they return or when they try to get into the employment market, right? But here we are in Davos, and 3 years ago I met Mohammed Yunus, the Nobel Prize winner. And he challenged the digital world, and he said, I want you to make a mobile phone that costs $20. Remember that? And that every poor person will have access to a mobile phone. And this is absolutely pragmatic, because you could put education on the cloud that people can then have some form of learning. At the same time, the 7 habits of effective people. So Stephen Covey has died, but his son Franklin Covey continued, and the Covey Institute said, hang on a minute, how about putting the 7 habits for young people onto an app? And we discussed how possibly young people in refugee settings or displaced settings could have leadership development through that. It didn't materialize because I changed jobs, but this is really something that I would love to pursue. And really today, we're in Davos, where Oxfam released this report that 1% of the world owns the same wealth as the rest of the world, and that 23 people own like 3.8 billion people's wealth. So I think how do you address inequity like this, but offering them a real opportunity to contribute. And Zuckerberg says he wants everyone to have access to internet. So I think this is a real opportunity. I think the digital world and technology should be able to help us in some way bridge. But I want to come back maybe to the last point, and then that is, we are hearing now a very disturbing narrative that countering violent extremism, and it seems to be creeping into the humanitarian sector, which worries us, because we need to be talking about principles, right, in terms of humanitarian action. I think it's a real opportunity here. Education plays a real opportunity to positive reinforcement, positive behavior, and we need to steer away from the stereotyping. I think this is something that's so critical. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because this seems to be coming in a lot of documents nowadays.
Yes, because there is obviously the big worry of radicalization, and we see also that if you have no education, no support, if you have been traumatized by a very violent situations, you are certainly, and that goes for every human being, much more vulnerable to people that can maybe make you believe in some sort of ideology, word. So we have to counter that in coming with our view of the world, our values, as I said, the respect of the other, the empowerment of every human person, of making everyone believe they have their own capacities and their own strengths, and that we can help them develop that. And so this is really a challenge also, and a much bigger challenge than just educating young people, but it's also giving everybody the chance to to continue these values that so many of our parents and grandparents and ancestors have fought for, of freedom, of human rights, respect, of education for everyone, of equality between men and women. So, and we are the one that can bring that. So I think this is important, and this is what is also behind the humanitarian principles.
Yeah.
So I think we have a responsibility and a duty to do it, and give everyone a chance to be able to find back the peace they couldn't have, or maybe they never had, and be able to also forgive sometimes, and go beyond what they have experienced, to be able to build a more peaceful society. So I think this is one of the big challenges we have, but it's very important.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to reinforce that. My name is Saul Klein. I'm the Dean of a Business School at the University of Victoria in Canada. Some of the work that we're doing is very much built around that same notion that we have to create hope.
Yes.
And education is the only thing that
Exactly.
creates hope that the future is going to be better.
Yeah.
And certainly the alternative you're suggesting is out there, that without that belief and hope, people who are coming in and promising false hope will be able to gain the ascendancy. A big part of what we're trying to do is build economic capacity. The idea that individuals will become self-sufficient, they'll see an opportunity. Even in post-conflict situations where we've seen political change, our view is that we have to build up that economic change to be able to entrench the political change.
And we will need all kind of capacities. It goes from the very engineers, but down the chain to very manual skills. But and it's also making everyone understand that they have a place, and each of them is a chain to rebuild their country, or to continue to develop economic possibilities, or to contribute to better living, creating social services. So there is a place for everyone, and I agree with you. Our role is to give hope.
Yes, please.
My name is Pavel Luksha. I'm a co-founder of Global Change Leaders. It's an NGO that's going to be launched next week officially. It's bringing some of the world's leading educators to work on, actually the main purpose is to create learning ecosystem for empowerment of the new generation, the empowerment of everyone, essentially. It's very aligned with what you discussed, and I'm very excited about the projects that you currently are running. And my question is, when I'm thinking about the situation with refugees, I see that we envisage this as a kind of creating the bottom line, the opportunity, just some opportunities for people to stand up, create a platform. But can we look the other way and say, okay, well, these people lost everything on one hand, but on the other hand, it's an opportunity for them to look at their life and open up and start to be co-creating something new. And empowerment is essential, of course. And part of the empowerment is also allowing people to be collectively innovative, prototype the world they want to see. And of course, that would also imply a little bit different model, that we need to encourage horizontal links more, peer-to-peer learning that you mentioned, but also probably cross refugees, communities, and having this as a social experiment, not on these people, but with the people, saying, why don't we create the new world now in this situation that will be better world than you had in the past? Not reintegrating them in the society, but building a new society together. Do you see that as a possible strategy? And I think this is very aligned also with the skills that you mentioned and these new opportunities that education provides for us, because we are at this turning point. It's a possibility to go further beyond what we have done so far.
So we have a couple of minutes left. Maybe you want to say something, and then we have to wrap up.
Well, I think we live in a globalized world, even for refugees. So, and that's the big advantage of digitalization, that you can also access information. You can be accessible also to others. You can get information from all parts of the world, or so. I think that, and there's certainly a way that we change patterns. So it's not about getting people back to where they were before, but I mean, we have also to take into account the fact that these people are coming, and when we talk about refugees, but we deal also with other people that are not refugees. So it's not only about refugees, but it's largely about refugees for the moment. So they will want, or we may think that they would want to go back home. And I think we all prefer to stay in our home country if we
Yes.
can. No? So I don't think people leave because, some of them leave because they want to leave, but it's a personal choice. In many cases, it's not a personal choice. So that's where they will want to build a better world probably than the one that they have left. But I think that's where we need to work collectively also. And again, one, and it maybe goes also for us, I think we are a bit too patronizing sometimes. And we should also get some feedback from and get more participation of those who are supposed to serve to better get their needs, but to see also how we have delivered on that and make lessons on that. And that's why I think it's a both way channel where we have our views, we need to test them, we need to get more of their needs. Now, obviously it's difficult to talk to everybody, and sometimes the situation, it's not when you are in an emergency situation that you can make, collective and exhaustive inquiries about people's needs. But then if you cannot do that at the beginning, you have to do it afterwards and get a feedback and retarget the programs. So as I said, we don't have many years experience in that, but there is a moment where we need to take stock, and this is what we want to do in the next year, so that we can better design and adjust the system. And it's an evolving anyway, it's not fixed situation. Needs are evolving, contexts are different. So
Well, it's been a great discussion. I'm really happy that all of you are participating, because in the last 360s was just us talking. So thank you for that. I think that it's really important. I think we are really at a tipping point in education. One of my big dreams is that we have all these summits and all these conferences. Can we not have one organized by refugees, for refugees, and they decide who they want in the room to have discussions with us? Therefore, what I'm saying is that we've got to stop talking about optimization, but we need to do more imagination. And I think with that, we as a federation working in our national societies in 191 countries, and we're there with them, before, during, and after a crisis. I think we have tremendous opportunities to work together, to try and find some solutions together. And I think this is an exciting time. So Monique, thank you very much for joining us today.
Jemilah.
Thank you everyone, and let's keep the conversations going. Thank you.
Thank you very much.